All right, welcome to Smallbrain Podcast, episode 3. Today, our guest is Karsten Pflum, electronic musician who currently lives in Berlin. He composes electronic music and does a lot of things. So, Karsten, how would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the music that you make and the process behind it?
Yeah, well, hi, Emmanuel. Thanks very much. Actually, I think you did a pretty good introduction of me already, because that's basically what there is to say. I'm an electronic musician slash producer slash DJ sometimes. I've been recording music for around 15 years, I guess, maybe a bit more.
All right.
Releasing different music on different various labels since around 2000, 2002 probably.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I live and work in Berlin, and I'm originally from Denmark, from
All right.
Copenhagen in Denmark, but I've been living here for quite a few years by now.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong. I've been listening to some of your music, and I kind of feel that there's a strong influence that comes maybe from early electronic music, like early funk and electronic music from the 80s, maybe even the 70s. So yeah, well, am I wrong? First,
No, I think you're right in many aspects.
so
I
what's
was
the
just
story
thinking,
behind that?
well, I think when I got into making music
All right.
back in the late 90s, I was probably influenced by a lot of different stuff, because my musical background was just like typically mixed, everything, be it, I think the first music that really turned me on as a kid was like listening to Michael Jackson probably, or
Yeah.
something like that. And then uh, I'd always been into music and like been playing a bit of instruments, been playing this and that, and in like various bands throughout high school time. And then
Yeah.
at some point, I sort of realized that this electronic music thing was really actually quite cool. I had a friend who had bought a lot of gear around his 18th birthday, and I was at his house and we were playing around with it, and I sort of had this epiphany that this was
Yeah.
totally my thing. This was just, the the option, or the possibility of doing everything yourself, kind of like being,
Yeah.
being the conductor or the director, and playing all the instruments at the same time, was just really, really intriguing to me. And also just I found it very, very cool, this whole making music with machines and computers. That was just something really, really wicked for a teenager at that time.
Yeah.
So I think for your question, I realized, like, more now, I think that these are probably my influences, or the sound that I'm influenced by. Like, I have in my record collection a lot of funk music and like early electro hip hop stuff.
All right.
Um,
Yeah, rock.
so yeah, it's kind of, yeah, a bit of rock also. Yeah.
No, but I mean Rocket from Herbie
Oh
Hancock.
yeah, yeah, of course. Actually, I was just watching this great YouTube video with that last night, where it's like completely crazy show, like out of this world, over the top show with Herbie Hancock and these
Right.
scratch dudes, and like this whole the choreography and everything
Yeah.
was just like next level shit.
Like,
So
this is something I can relate because I was a kid in the 80s, and I remember seeing that that video clip on TV, music video, and it
mm,
was like my mind was blown. Like, it was so different,
yeah,
so unexpected, and a little bit scary too. When I was maybe like 5, 6, 7, something like that. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
exactly remember the date, but there was something happening in the 80s with the synthesizer, and I don't know, like,
There
when
was a
did you
whole,
actually
like, there was a whole mood or vibe, I would say, in the 80s, also in films and stuff like this. There was some excellent like sci-fi movies and stuff like this being made also, where the mood was just very, very there was sort of like this a dark aspect to it, and this very serious, like very like highly aesthetic
yeah,
uh tone set. And I think this kind of still echoes into the music today, this
most
kind of
definitely.
very, yeah, I remember listening. I think what really also turned me on was listening to Kraftwerk at the first time in the radio when I was also a teenager, where it was just, I was completely blown away, like almost experiencing like new colors I hadn't seen before or something like this. Exactly like you say, like entering a new realm completely.
And it was so alien at the time, because I remember, like, I always was playing some instrument when I was young, and I remember when I was a teenager, I liked it, but there was this stance, like, oh, it's not real music. It's, you just press a button and it does a boom jack, and it took some time, I think. By the beginning of the 2000, that people started to realize, like, even like established musicians started to accept that, all right, this was something special, like electronic music, hip hop, stuff like that. It was something special. So, but yeah, how did it all start for you? Like, were you playing some instruments? You were in a band in like high school and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was like in a few bands, but nothing too serious, I guess. I think I was always quite musical in a sense that, I had the ears and maybe like the musical sense, the timing and the tones and everything. But I would always end up playing in these bands who were kind of a bit more goofy guys than me, and they just wanted to drink beer and, just play around and not be too serious. And I think,
get girls.
yeah, all that stuff, like, which are actually what normal healthy teenagers should be into.
Yeah.
But I was more obsessed by making music and making even writing songs or writing melodies and stuff like this. So when the opportunity presented itself, and I saw there was a way for myself just by doing music on my own with my machines, then it was just a point of no return, I guess. So I started out with nothing, more or less. I mean, I had a drum kit, and I had an old Casio keyboard that I used to like just record stuff on tape with. But then I was lucky to inherit some money, a bit of money from my grandma, and I spent all this money on buying an Akai sampler. An S2000 Akai sampler, which is...
I had one.
yeah, nice.
So difficult to use. Like, you really wanted to make some music to be able to just go through like the manual and trying to figure out how it works, man.
Yeah. Well, I also found this, only having this machine to begin with and like the MIDI keyboard hooked up with it, I found that it was really, you really had to get into this sampler and really understand in depth the stuff that you could do with it. So for the first like 1 or 2 years, I played more or less only around with this sampler, and I managed to make tracks only with this. Basically, I bought a small sequencer to go with it, like a Roland micro composer.
Oh yeah,
and,
the groove box.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, it's just a MIDI sequencer with the 8 tracks and a rhythm track. A really simple one, more for like recording stuff than really writing. But I managed to. I mean, the first stuff I put out is made more or less only with this Akai sampler, which I'm quite proud of now, because I don't know if I could even do that anymore, because I have too much gear now. Like it's a bit it's a different mindset now. But back then it was just because, being so determined at making something and trying kind of to live up to the music that I was listening to myself, like the electronic music I was finding, this really set like a very high standard. So I just think I worked like crazy with this sampler to make it, to make the really best out of it.
And you actually have to, because it's so difficult. Like you didn't have back then like YouTube tutorials and stuff like that. You had to figure out, like, you couldn't go to the conservatory and get some lessons and production lessons that like you have now. You have to find ways to make music in ways that nobody, like very few other people actually found about. And this is not something that was, like, internet was there, but it's not the amount of resource that we have now. Now you want to use a new piece of gear. You just watch a 20 minutes video on YouTube and you can use it and you can do exactly what you want. And it's even made to do that. Like Akai S2000 wasn't made to make, hip hop or electronic music. It was made, to emulate maybe a piano or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All these like real instruments it was supposed to emulate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like this time around 2000 was just like kind of the turning point, just before the internet like really started, taking off and like really being useful. It was the same stuff, the same thing when you found records in the record shop. Kind of I mean, there was a few magazines where you could read about this stuff, and of course we all had friends who we could call and ask, who knew more about this stuff, who'd been into this stuff longer time than us. And there were manuals you could read. Like I read, of course, this manual many times for the sampler, but at certain points I would get stuck, and then I'd have to call my friend Simon, who had the same sampler, and like ask him, hey, what do I do now? So it was just a very, I guess you could say, primitive world back then compared to now. But also, I mean, the fact that take this sampler for example, the way of learning to play it in your own way, so to say, when there's there's no instruction manual or there's no like tutorial on YouTube you can watch, then you sort of perfect your own way of playing it as an instrument. You invent your own techniques and your own approach. And I think that's actually somehow a problem nowadays, seeing as there's so much like YouTube again, there's so many tutorials, and every time there's a new machine or a new instrument released, and there's like 100 or 1,000 people like reviewing it and testing it and demoing it and stuff. And it just, I fear that the output becomes like much more generic, in a sense that, when young people get into electronic music, if they start out by watching YouTube tutorials on how to make a track and how to mix it and how to master it and stuff, then they're on a very, very straight set path, which is like, defined by other people more or less. Whereas if you acquire all this knowledge yourself in a sort of more autonomous way, then you definitely have a bigger chance of doing original stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want to say something about that. Like it's my opinion. It's not to say it was better before or it's better now. Or
no. I have to also be careful. That's not what I'm trying to say.
But like you say, if you think I'm saying something wrong, but when you have a very limited tool like some Akai Sampler S2000, that it can be a piano, it can be a guitar, which are also very limited in their own ways. Although you can learn to play these, but you cannot learn to play S2000, whatever. So you have to find somewhere, like it's not like you have an idea and you can, like in your head, and you can do exactly the same idea with what you have. You have to kind of search and find out what may sound cool and how you can make it work with something else that you found out before. And there's that kind of process through which in a way you kind of figure out who you are in relationship to the potential that presents itself to you. You listen to a sample, you kind of learn how to get this feeling that this is going to sound good, and go with it. Like in the world, like in life, like there are people who are able to see opportunities, and other people who just think, life is bad and politics is bad and everything is bad and my job is bad, and other people who always, like, even in the worst situation, they always kind of find out what they can do next, what is the positive thing that they can do next. And I feel like when you have a very limited equipment and to do music, you have to learn this process to look for opportunities. You know what I mean?
Sure, definitely.
Look for meaning.
It also comes down to like curiosity, being super curious about everything, the whole world,
and
people,
you
and
cannot really compare. It's not something that you can compare to many other artists. It's something that you have to decide for you. All right, this is going to sound good, but
Yeah.
nobody did it before. You
Yeah,
had to
exactly.
go
Yeah.
through this.
It's totally trial and error, and you have to also, yeah, you have to make a lot of
Yeah,
experiments, and you have to fail a lot in
yeah,
order to find where you stand, basically, and to find what you find cool. And I
yeah.
mean,
Find yourself.
of course, we are all influenced. I mean, we are part of the
Yeah.
bigger like food chain, so to say. We are all influenced by other stuff.
Mm.
It's completely impossible not to be. But I mean, even trying to copy other people's stuff sometimes, maybe not so much now, but back then, I would hear like a neat trick or like production trick on a record,
Yeah.
and I would want to do that myself. But the means of production I had were just much, much more simple than the people whose music I was listening to. So
Or simply
just,
different.
yeah, also that, but just even trying to do the same trick, like, okay, there's a snare sound here and I want to reverse it,
Yeah.
then I would have to record that stuff from my sampler onto my mini disc and then record it back to the sampler and reverse it. Whereas they probably just did it with a computer, just hit the reverse button.
Yeah,
So
or
just
maybe they did it with a tape.
or
Who
even a
knows?
tape. Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But definitely these when you it's definitely not about finding the easiest way to do stuff. It's sometimes about just insisting on doing it, I think,
Yeah.
even though it may be very time consuming or difficult.
And even the results may be different than what you were going for,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
it's still gonna sound good and it's gonna sound like you,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's never gonna be exactly the same as someone else. I guess there are tutorials and ways to make music that sounds exactly like this and that,
Mm.
but it's like when it's something that comes out of you, even through influence and culture, it's still like it feels more meaningful, and you can tell when you listen to some music. You can tell because like I always get some shit because people because I say, oh, you can make you can tell the difference between good and bad music,
Yeah.
and people say, oh, it's all about taste. And yeah, not really, because it's not about whether you like or not the music. You can not like some music but still recognize it's good music. Maybe you don't connect with that kind of music.
Mm. Yeah.
I always take the example, and people are gonna hate me for that, but I don't really like the Beatles,
Yeah. Mm.
but I can understand why it's good music.
Yeah.
It's not
Sure.
something that was made just because they wanted to make money, and it was not because they wanted to be famous or whatever. This is there's something deeper in there, and
Yeah, I
maybe
would
I cannot
really,
connect with it.
I would really agree with you on that point. Also, just the fact that anybody bothered to make the music that they make,
Yeah,
that kind of proves a point that they are really into it.
yeah,
That it's something they want to do, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And so you can take, I don't know how far you can take this example. Like if you take it all the way to maybe some Schlager music or something, which can be quite horrible, especially the German stuff here.
yeah.
I mean,
I'm
sometimes you think,
familiar.
okay, this is definitely only made to
Yeah,
to take money out of like all these grandmas' pockets, basically. But apart from this kind of music, more or less anything, you sort of have to, even though you don't like it, you have to respect the fact that people put time and effort and blood and sweat
yeah,
into it. Um, and also, it's very often it's just about listening to the stuff at the right moment.
yeah,
So, I mean, you might be at a concert or a show with a band you don't particularly like, but if you go in with the right mindset and you say, if you really find the music bad, then at least maybe you are able to have fun and have
yeah.
some kind of comical moment about it. Or, watch the people how they interact with the music, or just study it or something. Like
Yeah.
there's definitely some stuff you can always gain by insisting on being curious rather than just
Well,
dismissing it as being bad or awful.
well, there can be, you can have pleasure and fun in eating fast food,
Yeah,
and it's
sure.
fine. It's perfectly fine, and you have the rights, and it connects with like popular music, it does connect with a lot of people for many reasons, and some that are actually quite scientific. When you look at the harmonic series and stuff like that, you realize that, all right, you have like the 4 chords of pop music. Maybe you heard about them. Like there's a chord progression. And there's actually a scientific reason why these works. So this is something like even people who like say a musician who I just want to be famous and rich and I want to make whatever makes me famous and rich. But even like those people who think about fame and money and whatnot, they understand at a deeper level that music is something that's really, really powerful and that really, really connects with people. Because there are many other ways to make money.
I was also going to say, if you only want to be rich and famous, then there's definitely easier ways of doing it. I mean, just make an Instagram account and start. You don't really need anything to show in that sense.
You don't need to develop any skills, but
But I totally agree with you. I mean, even all the music that I don't particularly like, also I really respect it. That there's some. I don't really think you can make music at this like sort of professional level unless you are into the stuff that you make, unless you enjoy it, because otherwise, I mean, that just doesn't seem right to me. Then I would be totally disillusioned by the whole world.
You have to enjoy it.
I
mean, you have to enjoy it to some level.
You have to enjoy it yourself if you expect other people to enjoy it also. I would say it starts with yourself.
Yeah. But there are many different ways to enjoy the process of making music.
And there's many different types of music also. I mean, a lot of music is more about the recognizable elements. Like people, they like some good lyrics, like nice melodies they can sing along to, and they like if a song gets stuck in their head, and they like in the club that they hear something that they know already, and that's just totally fine, because music is so many different things. It's not a right or a wrong way.
Well, just look at any club, like even the most like popular, like hype trendy clubs with the most trendy music. Like when you look at what happens in these places, you have normal people with a job and living their life. They don't do anything special during the week, but they go to this place, and the way they behave is completely like they would never behave like that in the world. It's very liberating for everyone, even very popular and easy simple music, and it allows you to connect, to liberate yourself. It's
totally.
It does have some, and then if you want to keep exploring, you can get deeper into music and maybe get to learn about more complex, deeper music, and you can connect with yourself a little bit more, maybe by listening to you can appreciate whatever pop music is around today, and then you can maybe grow into appreciating, I don't know, classical music or jazz or complex electronic music, and
you're talking a bit about inspiration also, I guess. Like what inspiration is, in a sense. At least that's what I think is. It's kind of like batteries, like having your batteries recharged by all types of different stuff. I think if you are only inspired by stuff that you really like, or you really want to achieve, or you really look up to, then you are sort of living in a very like parallel world, just where you are in denial of reality in a way. Like I think it's very healthy to take, like I'm sure you agree also, it's important to talk to all kinds of people, not only colleagues like who have the same interest, but it's like to talk to everybody, just kind of I don't know, keep your antennas out to stay aware.
And just understand, like we all have each unique perspective on everything. So I think people, especially like people who you agree with, it's always nice to talk to someone who can kind of understand you on a deeper level, and have this kind of conversation. But it's very interesting when you actually start talking to people who you may disagree with on some points, maybe on some very fundamental points.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the premise that they might know something that you don't. you know, and maybe you do know some things that they don't, you know. In any
Yeah.
case, you could maybe help each other, you know, try to figure out, you know, what is life a little bit better. And
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's also the fact there's no like fixed result. There's no correct answer to that whole equation.
yeah,
We're all sort of just trying stuff, like
nobody knows.
nobody knows. And
Nobody.
I think that the real truth is sort of like what you find, like the average of all the stuff in a way, or like what you find, you know,
Yeah,
in between it all.
yeah,
Anyway,
and
life is too short to.
it goes
to
fast, right? It goes so
yeah,
fast.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean, man, I was
Yeah,
born
we
in
were talking about the
78.
we were talking about the age thing just before we
Yeah,
started recording, which is also I don't. It's not scary for me, but it's I don't know. I didn't expect because I don't know. It's for my music and my musical like
yeah,
career. It's actually it's becoming more and more interesting the older I get.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
and I really
well,
appreciate that.
you have more experience, you have more
Yeah,
stories to tell, you have more,
simply yeah.
you know, and this is something, you know, it's so interesting because when you listen to what you were making like 20 years ago,
Mm.
it's still like it's not like you kind of you get better with time, but the music you did like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's still relevant.
Yeah.
If it was sincere, it's still relevant today. And sometimes it allows you to connect a little bit with you know, who you were before,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
maybe reassess with some perspective, a new perspective, and say, oh, maybe, you know, this part of myself that I kind of, you know, put on a back burner for 10 years, maybe I should explore that some more, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but
And
I also think it's like a natural evolution in people's lives that happen. Like, say, the first birthday you can remember when you were 4 or 5 years old is probably maybe the most important birthday in your life because you
yeah,
had little else to compare to back then. It was
yeah,
like maybe you could remember vaguely the one from last year, but it was just a really, really big deal, this
yeah,
birthday thing, the first one kind of. And when you are slowly getting I'm coming close to my 40th one, and it's I've tried it a lot of times, so it's not I'm not completely newly I'm not in love with the idea anymore. And I think it's the same thing with music. Like when you are 18-year-old musician or producer and you're making stuff, you sometimes have this also when you hear like young people's music
yeah,
of this age, you have the impression that they are just so madly in love with what they do, like
yeah,
it's the first love of their life or something. And I think this kind of energy and this emotion and this feel is maybe it's different or it's difficult to achieve once you get older. But then
yeah,
on the other hand, you have all the experience and you have yeah, I guess, a much more mature way of looking at life. It's like all good things to eat. I didn't like really old nasty cheese when I was younger.
yeah.
I grow more and more fond of it because it takes some experience.
Experience,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
and and you realize, like, when you're 18, you don't really think you're gonna die someday, you know.
No, yeah.
And I just
If
turned
you if
40.
you are gonna die, it's gonna be
Yeah,
by
in a long time.
committing suicide when you're 27. But
So
you
it's
know,
easy to be lazy, but
yeah, yeah,
when you reach like 40, like I had, like I didn't think, like, I don't mind aging, but I didn't think it was going to be. It's still tough turning 40 because you realize when you're 18, most likely the time that you have left to live is going to be longer than the time you already lived.
yeah.
When you're 40, you can't be so sure. Like, best case scenario, you're gonna live the same amount. You're gonna live to
Yeah.
80. Best case scenario, maybe you smoke, maybe you drink, maybe this, maybe that.
Mm.
You know, and you realize, especially when you have the ability to create music and to do something that is so meaningful, you realize, all right, maybe I should, put my foot down and
Yeah.
make things happen, and maybe, get up early and work harder, and
Yeah,
maybe,
maybe stop the wishful thinking and stop
yeah,
stop saying, okay, I can do this tomorrow, or maybe the next one is gonna
Exactly.
be where it happens. But just more, being
And
focused on the now. How do you want to live your life? Do you want to, if you're gonna go down on the street and get hit by a bus, do you want to the moment where you get hit by the bus, do you want to be more or less happy with where you are, like right now, or do you want to you want it to be a moment where you're sort of just hoping for things to get better next year, kind of?
Yeah. It almost feels like the fear of dying. It's more something like the fear of not living. Because
Yeah.
if you live your life, if you realize your potential and if you make an impact, I think it's much easier to just let go.
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
If you didn't, and these last 5 minutes before, you're gonna go,
Yeah.
and you're gonna go back, and maybe I could have done that. Maybe I could have done that. Maybe if I worked just a little bit harder. Maybe if I complain a little bit less. Maybe if and you're gonna have all these questions,
Yeah.
And I think this is what life comes down to, because nobody knows whatever's after you die. Maybe it's just finished, and maybe you're gonna I don't know, maybe you're gonna go to some paradise and everything's gonna be nice. I doubt that, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
We just have to
You
wait
never
and
know.
see, I guess. But
It's just
but
life is.
do you think all this, like when you think about your life in terms of how much time you have left and what you want to do with it, does it happen on a very conscious level when you think about it, or is it more like a subconscious thing that always follows you, sort of?
It became very conscious.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
Because I can't stand like consciously thinking this thought. I don't know. It's sort of it's really, in a way, terrifying for me. So I
it is.
much rather just, I don't know. Maybe this is why I make music also, so I can just sort of hide in that and express some kind of emotions or thoughts that I have through the music on a more like subconscious way.
Huh. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's people are different, and it is terrified. It is terrifying when you think about your own death. But
Yeah.
like what is terrifying is, I think it's, if I want to make the terror go away, I have to live a meaningful life and say, all right, I can go now. I can. If I die tomorrow, everything is gonna be fine. Because I've basically living like what characterize living is you can act onto the world, right? So say when you think about what is eternal life, is when your actions keep going after you die. Like if you make such actions that even after your death you still have an impact onto the world, it's just as you are still living, like Einstein or Mozart or people like that. They still
Or
have,
even like people who aren't famous, people who maybe some people you knew that you lost, how they sort of also keep on echoing. They
most definitely.
echoing in your mind. Yeah. So this is a kind of footprint
So
you can make, I guess. But
this is this is the best model of the idea of religion, eternal life that we can have realistically, because nobody knows what goes after your death, but we know that if we make a difference right now, it may survive us. It may outlive us.
Yeah.
And
it's funny how people have always been so obsessed with like guessing about guessing about all the stuff that you can never find out.
Yeah.
Sort of, that's a very human thing, I think.
Yeah, it's fear. It's fear
totally.
to not know. So you can get into a dogma or ideology.
Yeah, you start inventing weird characters like old men with long beards and red clothes and stuff like this. It's quite funny.
What's funny is to think, all right, I don't believe there's a bearded guy in the sky who watches over everybody, but I like to think that I haven't watched everywhere, above the clouds. Maybe there is. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't believe there is, but I don't know. It's a little bit stupid, but
I
it's
think
true. Like, we don't know.
I think the stuff. I mean, we're also talking about stuff that's probably very, very difficult to grasp with our small animal brains. Anyway.
Yeah.
So if there is some kind of higher meaning or some kind of higher conscience or something, then I'm sorry to say, but I think we are not like really built to be able to understand it or be a part of it.
Unless maybe maybe through art, music, and creativity.
Yes, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess
That's
you could say, but I think you also have to be careful to not glorify the art thing too much and make it like this universal language or something. I mean, I know where you're going, and it's
yeah,
definitely like, I think it goes for anything you do. It's this kind of Zen moment where, if you are working in a supermarket at the cash register machine, then also I'm sure you have these moments where everything is like you're in a flow and everything is sort of just working out really well, and you have this nice feeling, and there's this kind of, I don't know, this kind of spiritual moment happening. And I think this can
yeah.
go for everything if you're really into it and you do it
That's
well
interesting.
and take it
I never really
seriously. Yeah.
thought. I never really thought of that. But
And I think just, that people tend to say this about art because then it's, I don't know, it's just art is also very easily conceived like this. It's it can sound beautiful, or it can sound emotional and stuff like this. Whereas if you look at somebody work in a supermarket, maybe there's not. I mean, it's not as it's a clear picture. Sort of, you just have to appreciate that she's doing a good job or something. Whereas
yeah,
like with art and music, you're really displaying something on a big scale. You know.
yeah.
Um,
I never really thought of that like that. But it makes a lot of sense actually, because
there was one of the Kraftwerk guys who started
yeah.
just riding his bike.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, and he just maybe he's still riding the bike around, and I think this was kind of the same sense of just being in this Zen moment,
Yeah.
or being in a flow or something.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I guess with art, it's art doesn't have this like it's not oh no, sorry, utilitarian.
yeah,
It's when you think about what's the use of art, it's very easily, if you yeah, if you are very pragmatic, it's extremely easy to decide that there's no purpose, there's no use to art. And I think
yeah,
a very few people think that, but I know I'm sure that they don't live that. But it's art is just something that's very difficult to explain. Like the reason why we have and we create art is, I understand that you can get into this flow state and very connect, like
mm,
deep connection, doing many other things. But art, I feel art is just that. It's only that. It's not. We kind of make it utilitarian,
yeah.
but at the very core of art, it's something else, and I don't
Yeah,
know what it is.
I don't know if I agree completely with you, or it's not that I don't agree, but I'm very much in doubt, and this is like it's a big question for me. Also,
It
like
is.
maybe I'm sometimes thinking maybe art and music, or art in general, it's a very privileged thing to be
It
occupied
is.
by, and to spend your time on, and like we're just in a very privileged part of the world where you know
I
we
agree.
more or less, we don't have any real major problems like, we used to have like 1,000 years ago, where we would basically like eat each other and,
But
do lots of horrible stuff to each other. Now we're at a point in civilization where we can sort of, okay, wow, we can start thinking about stuff like women's equality. Maybe, wow, that's really, we had a major peak in society, and we can like
yeah,
start, all this like spare time we have, we can just start making beautiful art and building, huge, beautiful churches and stuff
yeah,
with absolutely no other purpose than just for pure enjoyment, sort of. But that's a
it
privileged
is.
thing, I think.
But art was always around,
Yeah,
even especially in the darkest of times. And when you listen, especially in music, for example, the biggest, most ambitious pieces of music, of opera and symphonies, they were composed where people weren't as privileged as we are today. Like most people would die at 40, at the age
yeah.
we are now.
Ooh,
Like
yeah,
you know that's chilling when you think. And they were
yeah,
making like like these amazing pieces of art over sometimes years. They would compose at the piano for hundreds and hundreds of musicians, and they would never get to
But
hear
no,
them.
the peasants who were working in the fields, they didn't have time to do anything like this. I mean, it
Oh
was
yeah,
the
you and I.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Music.
It was,
Yeah.
the composer who was commissioned by the king or the emperor or something. They had the
Yeah.
luxury to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think
so
they
I'm just
realized.
trying to say that, art is like anything else. It's like going to the bathroom or eating or all these social activities you can have or whatever in life. I think it's more or less, at the same level. We just live in a society that tends to glorify it a lot, and who we are very occupied by looking at art.
All
Um,
right.
because maybe we're also at a point where we sort of have a lot of, spare time, and, none of us really believe in any sort of uh, religion and stuff like that anymore. Not as, not as fixed as people used to. People used to be horrified of what would happen when they died if they didn't do this and this and this in the
Yeah.
correct way. Whereas we're more,
Well,
we are
it's
so-called free people, so we need to, kind of deal with what the fuck we want to spend our time with.
I really like this conversation actually. Well, like
Yeah, me too.
trying to make my argument. I'm well. I don't know. I really like what you bring up, the argument you bring up, and I think it's really interesting. I just want to build up onto that
Yeah.
actually, because I still think there's a difference between art and everyday living. Because say if you want, there are many reasons why you become a cashier at the supermarket.
Mm.
And some people, they get a job and they really like get this sense of meaning, and they get into the state, and you can see at any job there are people who are better than others, and some who become even masters at maybe being a cashier, or maybe being a salesman or
Mm.
whatever, and they really get this sense of self-realization and meaning into
Yeah.
what they do. But at the beginning, like, you can do all of these, and you can be mediocre at everything,
Yeah.
and you're going to be fine. But if you decide you're going to do art, you cannot afford to be mediocre. You have to aim for excellency. You have to aim as becoming the best artist that you can possibly become, or it's not going to work out, whatever
Yeah.
that means.
I think we disagree on this point. It sounds like.
Maybe
Yeah. I'm
what's the
just thinking
commitment?
that, there's so much art now. I'm thinking mainly of music, of course. Like there's so much music. The internet is overflooding with music, which is kind of mediocre, and somehow it seems to serve a purpose also, in a way. Maybe it's
It
a
does.
therapeutic thing for the people who are making it. Maybe, maybe if they weren't doing that, they would be watching television, or if they weren't watching TV, they would probably, just get up and go out on the streets and start like making trouble. So it's maybe it also has like a pacifying effect or
Yeah,
something.
but you don't really have like you don't really get a salary right away. You have to commit. You have to have certain degree of commitment
Yeah, yeah,
before.
this I
And, and
follow. Yeah.
and when I talk about success, I'm not talking about being famous and having money and that can be part of it for sure.
Mm.
But it's more about the feeling at one point in your life. All right, I'm at the right place right now. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm here. I was brought here for this reason, for doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I think with art you have to kind of commit to that. And if you just get a job and go with the flow, you don't have to. You can, and I think it's best that anyone does. But
Mm.
many people, they don't have to, so maybe they don't do the sacrifice to get better. Maybe
Yeah.
they don't just care, they just want the money. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's a waste. I think I would love a world where everyone would kind of realize themselves and bring onto the world the most positive and constructive. Of course that's never going to happen, but we can try to tend this way, by the way we, educate our children, by the way
Mm.
we interact with other people, we can inspire them maybe to reach for their potential, and
Yeah.
going for a job maybe doesn't it does not much incentive to go there. You can decide to go there if you want, but if you commit to art, this is where you need to go if you ever want to feel at your place in the world.
But I don't you also think it's a little bit about fear, how some people are more controlled by, well, fear, it has such a like bad ring to it, but
Yeah.
some people, they want really, a
Safety.
stable safety. If you have kids, you need a income. If you have a house, and if you don't want to have like wakeless nights where you're like lying in your bed and sort of thinking about how to pay the rent for the next month, then then it's obviously you should pick a job like with some stability. And if, I don't know, like for my sake, I think it's also kind of, I'm a bit retarded in this sense of being like a normal citizen, who's thinking about, putting money on, away on the side, so I have some extra on my account, or I don't really stress about.
It's not about money.
It's
Life
not
is
about money, but and maybe at the same time, because there's like this, music and art has its own economy in a way,
Yeah.
which is not monetary, but which is I don't know, like, maybe stop me if this becomes like too spiritual again, but that there's some kind of karma law also going on. So if you put something out there, if you share and you create something and put it out there, then you're almost certain to get something back also.
Yeah, and it's not always obvious, It's
No.
it's not always, all right, I'm gonna give that and I'm gonna get that. It's just
No, it's not like a one-to-one relationship. It's not like, you probably know this feeling also if you are going somewhere to play a gig, and you have to spend so many hours on traveling and carrying heavy stuff, and then you arrive at the place and you hang out there, and then you have to play a concert for maybe 1 hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's
maybe
and
for
that's
one
it.
people,
And then,
two people.
yeah, for two people, maybe even on a good night, right? And then you go back the next day. So you've spent like, less than 1% of the time on actually doing the meaningful stuff, so to say, and the rest is, whatever. But you should never think like this, because the moment you start thinking like this is, it's a very destructive way of thinking about it.
It's really about, you have to be willing to give, not expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
On the faith, it's just blind faith that maybe it's the best thing that you can do. Giving and giving some of your time and giving some of your energy and creativity for other people, and maybe that, like, understanding that it's a reward in itself. Like, you're gonna meet some people, you're gonna have conversation, you're gonna go places, you're gonna see amazing things, and maybe you're gonna make a good living with it. Maybe you're gonna see, travel all around the world, and these are rewards in themselves, but they are easy to take for granted. Once you kind of get used to whatever's good to you. If you have money, you get used to money, and then you keep focusing on, oh, this is not good, this is bad, and you don't appreciate, like, the reward is also in the appreciation of whatever. Like, as you were saying, we live in countries with extremely privileged. Like, we're richer and more, we have instant access to knowledge, culture. Like, it's like, even the kings 30 years ago, the most powerful people on earth, wouldn't imagine having so much access to knowledge and culture as everyone basically in our world has today. Not in the whole world, but in the Western world, like countries like, Germany, France, USA, when everybody has a laptop,
Exactly,
iPad, and whatnot.
Now we are more maybe faced with the problem of having we have to consciously make stuff more simple for ourselves, so that it's easier to navigate. Like, again, like, this music analogy, it's I also still find it much more easy to be creative inside a fixed frame, so to say, like a narrowed down frame, than as, sitting there with, a blank canvas in front of you and just having all the possibilities in the world, but you don't know really how to break the code. Whereas if you have a say you have a piece of paper with squares on it, then already you can sort of just maybe start filling out the squares and see what happens.
Yeah.
But this is something we have to make an effort to do in our like privileged part of the world, I think.
Yeah, it's not take the easy way, you know, like it can be easy, so let's just not do any effort, you know.
Yeah.
It's as you were saying with music, like now we have all this like virtual instruments, many synth, like everybody has a modular now, and we have all this gear that's specifically made for making electronic music, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, you know, thrive to still be more creative, to still find new ways to make some music. And it's funny because there's a lot of people who make music and who decide to make it harder on themselves, you know, like all these people trying to do music without a computer now, you know, only using hardware sequencer, and and sometimes people like only recording on tape, you know. So
this I can totally relate to. I mean, this is partly what I do myself also in the way that I work. I mean, obviously I have the computer and I have tools also, which are very, you know, awesome and potent, but it's very often it's a fact that you need to like set down some limited rules for yourself when you start out. So like choose, okay, I can only use this and this machine, or I have to start out a place somewhere where I only use this sound, or where, you know, you have to make some dogmas for yourself. And this is this is super important, I think. And whereas I don't know, in parts of the world where there's not so privileged people, but you know, you sort of maybe have to make music with 2 pieces of wood or whatever, then it's just more obvious that it's the only thing you can do, basically.
Yeah, and
all this freedom leads to a lot of confusion and ultimately like depressed people also, I think.
But I mean, like on my part, I've been like, I always was playing the piano since I was a child, but I never really learned. And basically I thought, all right, I'm 40 now, and I'm supposed to be a piano player, but I don't really know how to play very well. So I started to work on, you know, some classical music and stuff like that, and to really challenge myself. And it's incredible, like how much you can learn just staying on one instrument, and you can really learn how to place, you know, the music and how to express it, you know, and all the various ways you can do just with one tool. And then you go back on the synthesizer and the sequencer and the samplers, and you carry that away. You carry that with you. Then you try, all right, maybe I can have a little bit more expression in this part, and then your music gets deeper, you know.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I also think, you know, sometimes, I mean, there's the thing about some people say this, doing your 10,000 hours on an instrument, or, you know, doing your time so you really learn to perfect the language that you are speaking. But at some point you also sort of reach this point where you can sort of transcend, and, you know, this knowledge on any specific instrument to more or less anything, you know. So sometimes it becomes natural. Sometimes I feel like I've improved my skills in something without actually practicing, but sort of just by thinking, or like sort of even subconsciously thinking about something. Then I will have improved my skills because I've done these 10,000 hours on my, you know, main instrument, like the piano, like you say.
And you can translate this to other instruments, and it's nice, because if you limit yourself now, it doesn't prevent you to unlimit yourself later, you know, and but still have the learning process of, you know, creativity. And I remember I sold this synth, but I had a MS-20 Mini. And at first I was kind of disappointed because it seemed like it could only
Did you have the MS-20? Did you play with the MS-20 before that? Do you know it also?
I didn't. I knew about the synth because I kind of like synth,
Yeah.
But in the late 90s, you would have to buy original one, and that would be very expensive. Back then, I had a Pro One, which was my
Oh,
analog
cool.
synth back then.
Yeah.
And so when they got the Mini, so I decided, it's compared to an original one, it's very cheap and it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm gonna get one, and I was kind of disappointed because it seemed like it could only do like that one thing, that one sound, and but I didn't have that much money. I didn't want to change, so I kept it, and I was all right. Let's just do music with it and see what. And after a few months, it's like you build a relationship with the synth. First, you need to try to learn the language so that you can communicate. And once it kind of becomes your friend, you can get it to do other things.
Yeah.
It will always do them in its particular way, but you can learn. It's like a person.
It's totally like a person. It's when you fall in love with somebody or you like somebody, then you very often like them in the beginning for the wrong reasons, so to say, of for the picture that you have about them inside your head. Whereas when you get to know them, you get to know all the the quirky sides and all the the charisma, like you say, with this machine. Also this the characteristics and the all the weird things that you couldn't think of or imagine by yourself, which is actually the real stuff.
Yeah, and that's also why I think people can actually make great music with very limited tools, and because they kind of get into this relationship, and it like the tool, once you get to know it, it becomes an extension of you. It's you kind of negotiate with it, and it can take you directions that maybe you didn't expect, and if you learn to follow, you go, your music gets deeper, and you explore different tones and stuff like that, and also it can help you go to directions that you want to go, and sometimes you need to negotiate, which brings me to one question I really wanted to ask you.
Yes, please.
All right, so I was listening to the Lowcanticles,
Oh yeah.
the very first track, Reichenberger Electro. I don't know if I say.
That's totally good pronunciation.
All right, great.
You're so A+ German student.
Because I know I had this, like, I'm really, really a big fan, and I know it's cliche, of the Moog ladder filter.
Yeah.
This particular sound. And I couldn't quite find a filter that would, like, a sound that would rival it in my ears. But that bass you have on this track, what is it?
This synth line is it's an MFB synth Lite.
All right.
It's this small blue MFB synth, really simple one.
Yeah, and I think it's cheap too, right?
It's quite cheap, yeah. But it's a wicked one. It's really, I can totally follow what you say. It's very. Sorry?
I was really expecting you to tell me about super expensive synths and like the small MFB. You blew my mind because
but I would say that's it's very typical also. I mean, I have the same, people, like say I used to be a lot into this guy Bogdan Rasinski and his music, like listening a lot to it before I finally met him, and like I had these ideas that he's using this and this gear, and he must be doing this and this, and then I met the guy, and he's just making it all on the computer, with a like monkey tracker or something like this.
It's infuriating because I cannot do music with a computer, but some people are so good.
Yeah.
Like they're really, really, really good. Like, come on, this was made with a computer.
Yeah.
Like, you can have, come on, and had my hats off to them. Like, I've been trying. I can do some things, but I really like to touch the knobs and
I like this whole this tactile. Thing also, where you have buttons and you have knobs and stuff like this, which aren't. It's not just a controller controlling the computer, but you can actually sort of. I don't know. It's tactile, definitely. I like this. You get some like resistance from these machines. Sometimes you really have to. Sometimes you have to like really persuade them a lot, and you
Yeah.
have to mind their small weird personality, issues and stuff.
Yeah,
So
but I
it's like
think
it's like the difference between an old really nice car like a Volvo or something,
yeah,
and then some new like super fancy Chinese car
yeah,
which nobody knows how to fix. Um,
yeah,
but the Volvo is still, once the engine, it might, be really, you need to like look after it a lot, but once the engine is running, it just sounds like a dream, And I think this
yeah.
goes for the instruments also.
And I think some manufacturers really got that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like in the early 2000s, you really had nothing. Like you had some good synth, like back then, like mainly digital, but very good, like Nord and
Yeah.
Access and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's
But
true.
like nobody was making analog synth. Like
No.
and right now you have, it doesn't have to be a re-edition. Like I got a Moog grandmother lately,
Oh yeah.
and it's so like it almost feels like a little bit like a MS-20 in the way that it has some character. You will not be able to make it do everything that you have in mind, but
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting,
Yeah.
you know and it's really funny, and it's you have
Sometimes
this
you just
feeling.
have to kind of go, take the ride and go with where it takes you also.
Yeah, yeah. And same goes like with the Korg. They did the Volca.
Yeah.
That's amazing little sense. And
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really, I mean, there's a few companies who are really, who are understanding this and like
yeah,
rethinking how to, take the best from the old synths and the old
yeah,
samplers or whatever and sort of optimize it, but keep still keep it loyal to like the original
yeah.
products.
Not make it that easy and full of features that you can do everything that you want. And no, you can
Mm.
just do that. But
Yeah,
it's probably going to be enough.
yeah, do that,
And
and then if the synth is like half or one quarter of the size that it used to be, hey,
yeah,
then I'm super happy because
yeah.
I don't
And
have that much
it
table
has
space anyway.
MIDI.
It has MIDI, yeah, yeah, exactly. That's great.
Like,
But the basic core is still the same.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, and
But I mean,
still,
so that
it's
whole discussion, it's some people are still nowadays, spending a lot of money on buying, say, like a 808 drum machine
yeah,
or a certain piece of gear which was really, really, you know,
iconic.
iconic and like defining for
Yeah,
this whole for the electronic music sound for
it's a
like the
culture.
last decades or something.
Yeah,
But when you think about it, actually, the people who started using the 303s and the 808s and this stuff were just like poor kids from Detroit or something who
yeah,
would find these machines in like retail shops or even in the trash
yeah.
sometimes and
For
like
nothing.
oh yeah, exactly, and then make a use out of the machine which wasn't intended
Yeah,
in a way. And I think it's really quite important for us, like nowadays in 2019, also to have this same kind of, this is the curiosity again,
yeah,
like I don't maybe want to spend that much money on like an iconic drum machine when I can get, 10 or 15 small weird pieces of gear that I can, do
yeah,
kind of new forward thinking stuff with. In the same sort of mindset that they used to do back then.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is
I think that's the idea,
yeah,
and it's a great
but
opportunity.
not it seems like not all people seem to, I don't know, sort of agree with me on this, because there are a lot of people still being very just collecting these old machines and trying to, I
It's
don't know, like
easy to
kind of,
get lost in that. Also, it's
yeah,
easy
exactly, yeah.
whether it's new or old. Like I know some people, they just collect. But when I ask, all right, well, can you send me some link of some music that you?
Mm,
Yeah, I didn't really record anything. But they
yeah,
have this whole amazing studio, and they just keep buying and buying and buying, and it's
mm,
fun. But you still have, at some point, you have to settle down and say, all right, now I'm gonna make some music, the
yeah,
best music that I can, with whatever that I have. I'll be
But I mean,
moving.
some people are different also. There are these
Yeah.
types of producers or musicians who are just more into the, the geeky side of things. So they buy a new machine, then they play around with it, they test it, and they, sort of try to figure it out, do all the stuff that you can possibly do with it. And once they've done that, it's like, okay, I can put it
Sure.
on the shelf now.
It's fine.
I've done that. That's fine because
It's fine.
it's whatever
Yeah.
rocks people's boats. It's fine.
'Cause, yeah, ultimately, like, of course, there's more and more music, especially since the internet. There's more and more music around. But I mean, within all this music, that you still have, you have a lot of people who just want to have fun. Like
Mm.
they had when we were teenager, we had a rock band or cover band or whatever,
Yeah.
and there are still a small amount of people, I think, like yourself and others who really like decide to completely dedicate their life to it.
Yeah.
And that's still gonna show one way or another. That's still gonna come, I think, to the attention of more and more people. And I think that's what's good with internet, is that you don't have to go through sending a tape that's not well recorded to a
Yeah.
record label somewhere and
Mm.
waiting for the pod. You can just put it out there, and if it connects with people, maybe it is different, maybe it is nothing like anyone never heard anything like that before. Maybe
Yeah.
it's completely new, maybe, but it can connect with people.
Mm.
You can make like confidential music and still reach millions of people because of the
Yeah, and
internet.
that's a really beauty of the times that we
Yeah.
live in now. Like when we started talking, we were like complaining and bitching about how everything used to be better in the old days. But I really think that this is like the major chance or the opportunity of the time we're in right now, is kind of to abandon this like sort of prehistoric model of how what record labels, artists and
Yeah.
distribution and all that stuff, how that used to work with everything being on physical releases and everything having to be distributed by post and stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
now, I can make a track. I don't even have to put it on a record label. I can just, put it on my Bandcamp, and
Yeah.
if enough people like it, then it can pay my rent, so to say. And
And
there's
you
like
can
you
make.
just cut away all
Yeah.
these layers of vultures that sort of wanna have a piece of the cake.
And you can basically learn the skills, to market yourself. You can learn the skills, to design a cover. You can
Yeah, yeah,
learn all this online, and I think this is where the new generation, like people who are like 18s, 20 now, they
yeah.
really were born into that, so they have this kind of instinctual way to navigate internet,
Yeah,
which we don't.
they're not afraid of computers and the internet,
Yeah,
like our
yeah,
parents' generation
yeah.
used to be, like, oh, what happens if I press this button? Like, yeah, it's gonna explode,
Yeah, and our generation, we're extremely privileged because we've known both worlds
Mm,
equally, almost equally.
yeah,
Being 40 today, internet came about, generalized when I was about 20. 20
yeah,
years ago.
yeah,
So that's like what, 98? Yeah, that's about right.
yeah. That
When
sounds
when
right.
it
Yeah,
became worldwide, really generalized.
www, and you started,
Yeah,
surfing the internet and
yeah,
looking at everybody, or some people had a website, a web page
yeah.
and stuff, and then you could like
You
go
had to
there and see
program it
see
in
pictures
HTML.
of their family or something.
But we
Or
still,
MySpace, even just MySpace. You remember how cool that was? You
yeah,
know,
and
Again,
uh,
talking about the limitations, like
yeah,
compared to what the social media platforms are like now. There's,
there's still a
you know,
MySpace. That, by the way, I've checked. I don't know exactly what
yeah.
it
What
is, but
what happened to that? Like the
I don't
Rupert
know.
Murdoch fucked it up, I think somehow.
Probably.
Because I don't know. When I go to MySpace, it's just sort of like,
Yeah,
the wheel shows up on my computer, kind of.
yeah,
Something is wrong with the code there. I think they messed it up.
yeah. But it's still
But
there. I
it's
don't know.
still
But
there.
I
Yeah,
had
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
It was fun.
yeah.
But yeah, the point where I was getting at is our generation. We are the last generation that will live on Earth who will carry the experience of living unconnected, offline. And
That's
I
true.
think that's a great responsibility that, I don't know if you have children. I have a teenage
No, I
son.
don't have children.
All right. Maybe you have one day, and
Yeah,
we
maybe,
have
yeah.
to, yeah, I think we have to, make sure that they are still able to appreciate what internet is, for example, the
Yeah.
value it has, because it's easy for us to see because we knew the world before, and we were a teenager. We didn't think about internet.
Mm-hmm.
We had this mindset. Oh, I'm gonna live here, and with some luck, I'm gonna go to big city. Maybe something's gonna happen, but most likely, I'm gonna have to work, and that's that. And
Yeah, yeah.
to like overnight to a point where we have all the opportunities to go anywhere, learn anything, connect with anyone
But do
worldwide.
you think this was really something special with the internet, or don't you think this is maybe something that happens from all generations, passing stuff to the next generation? I mean,
I
you
think
know, there's
internet is special.
the internet, and maybe making being able to print stuff, like printing techniques,
Uh,
like
I'm,
industrialization, also like these things like this are major,
I
major,
would
major.
place internet higher than that.
Really? Then,
Yeah, I would.
yeah,
More like a result of the printing press. The
yeah,
printing press
yeah, yeah,
was
yeah,
was the
sure,
beginning, and it
yeah.
all culminates in internet, because internet really changed everything for everyone. You know, it it,
Hmm.
to the
Yeah,
point that,
and also I have to say, but in a lot of bad ways also, it brought out
yeah,
the worst
it
in
was so
people.
fast that we are struggling adapting. You get people addicted to internet games and stuff like that, and social media. You can lose a lot of time, watching fail videos and stuff like that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everybody
sure.
does it.
Or or you go online and then you sort of, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I have these days where I go online and I just when I finish checking my email, I'm sort of like, okay, internet, what else do you have? And my imagination is just
Bring it
not,
on.
yeah, it's just not big enough or something. So I'm just like, well, okay, there's nothing much fun on the internet today. I'm just gonna turn off my computer again.
I,
But
I think it
maybe
was. I think it was
that's
in a
more about me.
podcast with Elon Musk sometime a few months ago. He
Yeah.
was saying, and I think that's nice. Like internet is like an extension of our brain. When you look for some information in your brain, you have this kind. You
Mm.
have the internal interface. You think, all right, I'm going to look for that information. Then you go into memory or logic or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And with internet, you have the interface. It's still primitive, like Google and stuff like that, and Internet Navigator on your computer. But
Yeah.
basically, it's the same. If you want to remember something, not only you can remember something that you know, but you can remember something that somebody else's know.
Mm.
You can learn knowledge. Not only you can remember knowledge that you have, but you can also learn knowledge that somebody else has.
Yeah, as long as you know how to access it, as long
Yeah,
as you know that
as
it's
long
out there and know how to
yeah.
access it, then
Yeah, it's an interface problem, but you can see, like the regular conversation. Oh, who was this actor in this movie?
yeah,
But
yeah.
like
Let's ask,
20 years ago, you
hey
wouldn't
Google.
know.
Yeah,
you know yeah, you
yeah.
ask Google, and most people our generation don't really have this reflex right now, but young
Mm.
kids, they know right away. They do it right away, so
Yeah, we
they're
used to
on
have this
fast track.
encyclopedia, when I
Yeah.
was a kid, like this
Oh, man.
on an entire bookshelf. Okay, find the letter E and then look it up.
Yeah,
Like,
and that was all you had.
yeah,
Like,
and then
maybe it was wrong or
that
outdated.
was all you had, and then the
Yeah.
evening was gone, and you had to go to bed because
Yeah.
things took a lot of time. Yeah.
I actually used to sell this encyclopedia, and for a couple of months it was a horrible job, but
Oh wow, wow.
experience.
Yeah.
Like the cliche salesman, going to your door. Oh, you're gonna have to know. I just quit one day. I just went home. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, where are you? I'm going home. Fuck you.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Cool.
That's I'm sorry. I'm swearing. That's
No, no worries. No, it's allowed here in Germany.
yeah. It is.
Anyway,
But
we are talking English, so nobody understands us.
yeah, it's like music. We used to listen
Yeah.
to rap music, and we didn't understand it well.
No, we would just sort of imitate the sounds they were making, not really knowing what they were saying. which I find cool
But,
also still.
yeah, I actually I used to sing like back in the days. I never really was satisfied, and I wanted to sing again like a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't know what to write. So I'm just gonna write some words that sound cool, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna sing just that. And it was fun. It's like maybe someone in other parts of the world can enjoy it. But
I
yeah,
was working on a track last night
yeah,
where my friend came into the studio and he said, "Wow, wouldn't it be?" Well, I think he just said, "Can't touch this."
yeah,
And then I thought, okay, wow, maybe this MC Hammer sample would actually like be cool, like as a loop running through the entire song, basically.
yeah. You
But then
put
I
it
was like,
there.
oh, do I have this on vinyl? No, I don't. Oh, there's no really good internet connection here, so I can't find the song. So we just recorded it with microphone with him saying like, can't touch this.
All right.
And it sort of became a bit goofy and it changed into, some other words, just like meaningful or meaningless gibberish sort of.
Yeah,
But it was really useful. When he left, I was able to like put it in the tracks in a track in a few places, and it's sort of, yeah, it's the words are really, they don't mean anything, but they sort of have this reference still, in the way they
yeah.
sound.
And I think that's something that's kind of new. I mean, it was used before with vocoders and talkbox, but
Yeah,
nowadays, I think it's been maybe a decade or so. You can hear more and more sounds, especially in electronic music, that sound kind of like a voice, and you can even buy like
yeah,
modular synths, like modules that have
that
this
do
kind of features,
like
and
stutter
that
voice stuff. And
it's a weird way, like it connects musically, like the sound of human voice does have a special connection. Like
it does.
after
I think
all,
it really resonates with the brain. Like it brings out, yeah, because the human brain is built for being like hunters in the forest, basically. So
yeah,
these kind of the voice pitch, uh, yeah, really has this like crazy like psychoacoustic
yeah.
way of working in our brains.
I was,
But I really enjoy this fact of like hiding. It's the same way when you sample not voices but like sample from records and stuff like this. How you sort
yeah,
of you have to change it and mold it around to make it your own and put it in the context of the music you're making so that it's sort of it only slightly maybe references what it was before, but it's like
yeah.
pointing in a new direction. I find this really really cool, like a philosophy in general.
That's stuff that actually electronic music. Like there's still some people right now who are yeah, it's not real music, it's synthesizer, it's not natural and whatnot.
Mm,
But I think like it really, especially nowadays with all the new like instruments and synths that come out, it really takes creativity in completely new directions.
yeah.
It's like you don't like most people who make music right now, they don't know how to write and read music, they
Mm,
don't they probably don't know how to play the piano or guitar. They
yeah.
just kind of grew up with Eurorack and analog synth and
Mm,
sampler and that kind of stuff. And we used to think that all music was basically invented already,
yeah.
but we didn't take into account that someday we would have tools that would allow us to really really explore like the textures of sound and with modulations and how waves interact together, and it gets so much deeper. This is probably why I kind of went back to electronic music, because you can have so much like texture, and depth, and it can be
Yeah.
really, you can almost touch it.
I think traditionally music used to be mainly about rhythm and melody.
Yeah,
So if you could, because this was how you could like deliver it from one person to another, you could sort of sing the
yeah,
melody, or best you could write it down on a sheet of paper so that other people
yeah,
could play it. But
yeah,
now, everybody is an instrument builder. You build
yeah.
your own instruments first, then you make your own sounds.
You make your own music
You make your own music, and
yeah,
it's
from the ground
crazy.
up. Yeah, it's from the ground up. It's from the wave, the fundamental wave form. and you create something that is you, an expression of you, and how you connect with the world. And I think electronic music has that specifically. It removes, like, it's always nice to have, boundaries to be creative, but if you really want to express as much as yourself as you can, then you want to be able to still have tools that will remove all the boundaries that you can have creatively, and you can explore as far as you desire. And
Yeah.
that's, electronic music instruments. That's how I take them. What they're all about.
Yeah,
Explore.
and then there's still like these like classical principles of music, which I
Yeah,
really still also find very, very valuable, like
yeah,
this, a good melody
yeah,
and a nice rhythm. This is still, it's much easier to have like this, this piece of a melody stuck in your brain than this like weird glitchy drone, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think the combination of the two is really
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. I
And
would
maybe
agree.
like in the future there will be even more aspects brought into music.
Yeah.
I can only,
Who
yeah,
knows?
like, who knows? You can only
Who knows?
imagine like, more, maybe more interactive stuff, or more like stuff being generated by itself, or
Yeah.
yeah, etc., etc. New ways of releasing music and so on.
It's and yeah, it's far. Like, electronic music is after all, it's very far from just pressing a button. It's about, really, like, like getting into uh, extend, like, it's almost cybernetic in a way
Yeah.
that as we were talking before, like, the instruments, they become an extension. There's not one good way to use a synth or sampler.
Mm.
You have to integrate them to who you are,
Yeah.
and then, they allow you, just like a bionic arm or something, to reach further, and
Mm.
stronger, you know
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I think people, in the 70s probably they were just afraid of, becoming unemployed because they thought that the drum machine or the synthesizer could,
yeah,
you know, steal their
that's
jobs
true.
basically.
That's true.
Sort of until they realized that maybe this was just the beginning of a whole new like scope of
Nobody knew.
possibilities.
Like, when I try to remember, and I was very, very young in the 80s, like, I would have, like, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined this to ever happen.
Mm.
Who knew?
Yeah,
Come on.
completely. Yeah, yeah. This is what makes me also be pretty okay with thinking about the future, because there's always this like uncertainty factor. There's
Yeah,
only so and so much you can imagine yourself, and that's fine. And then the
yeah.
rest of the world will deal with the
It's not
last
up
bit.
to us.
It's not up to us. No, no,
It's
no.
not up to us.
Luckily, there's stuff we can't imagine here.
I mean, some of it, we can hope to have some impact, and I sure do. I will, and I'm sure it's the same. But ultimately it's going to end one day or another,
Yeah,
and
it looks
whatever
like it.
happens between now and then, it's we can do our best to have some impact on it, and we should. But ultimately, it's not at all up to us. So yeah, but it's fine. It's all right.
It's fine. I mean,
It's
we're
fun.
like I said before. Also, I think we are just animals with small human brains who aren't really
Yeah,
able to deal with this kind of very complex stuff at a very high level. So I think we should just tell ourselves it's gonna be okay, and this is this is what we can do.
I think that's a good way to wrap it.
Yeah, cool.